What is up, you beautiful people? Welcome back to the Jordan Davis podcast. I am your host, Jordan Davis, and I hope you're having an awesome and wonderful day. It is December, and so I want to wish you a very Merry Christmas. And I want to thank you all for listening to the podcast. Today's podcast is going to be about Spider-Man No Way Home, and this week is going to be about what is the expectations of this movie. What should we expect? Is our expectations too high, too low? Is it getting out of bounds? Is it getting crazy? Is it getting extreme? Or are we perfectly balanced? What should we expect in this movie? And that's what I'm going to talk about on today's episode. But before I get into that, I want to thank you all for listening. And if you're new to this podcast, I talk about all kind of movie things. I talk about movie news from Marvel, DC, from all kinds of blockbusters going on around in the Hollywood world. I talk about them all. So if you like that kind of thing, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you're listening to on Spotify, Apple, and all of that, make sure to rate me and give me a good review if you can. So now that we got that out of the way, let's talk about expectations for Spider-Man No Way Home. Now, there's a lot of expectation going on. There's a lot of things, to really get excited about. There's the three Spider-Man. There's Charlie Cox's Matt Murdock. There's so many things you can really think about from the villains, from what the action could entail. It could be the greatest action of a Spider-Man movie we have ever seen. Um, and so there's a lot of big expectations in this movie, and I kind of want to from my point of view, I want to say this is what I'm expecting. I'm expecting a great Spider-Man movie. I'm expecting Tom Holland's arc from the Homecoming trilogy to really be wrapped in a bow and really be pushed towards the college trilogy, the second trilogy that they're going to do with Spider-Man in the MCU. That's what I'm expecting. Um, I'm expecting the villains and the Spider-Man to really enhance Tom Holland's Spider-Man, to really enhance his character arc. That's what I'm expecting. Now, here's what I'm not expecting. I'm not expecting we're gonna get something totally outlandish and crazy. Like, I'm not expecting X-Men in this movie. I'm not expecting Fantastic Four, a tease to Fantastic Four. I'm not expecting that. I'm not expecting Wolverine. I'm not expecting Professor X. I'm not expecting Miles Morales to be in this movie. As we all know about he is, the ultimate version of Spider-Man. And as we all know, Miles Morales has his own movies in animation, but I don't think he's going to be coming into live action just yet. Um, and so let me explain why it would be a bad idea for it to have X-Men, to have Professor Xavier, to have Kane, to have whatever you can think of to put in this movie. Um, because it would take the focus of Tom Holland's story. Tom Holland's Peter Parker, Tom Holland's Spider-Man, in the arc that he's been going through on in this Homecoming trilogy. And from everything I've seen from the trailers, from the TV spots, from the interviews, from articles, anything you can think of to get news from, it's been focused on Tom Holland's character. You know what I'm saying? That's what they're trying to keep focus on. And if you have all these characters um that really don't fit in, It's not gonna be a good movie. And I think that's kind of what Amazing Spider-Man 2, kind of lost its focus. Uh, Amazing, as I said, Amazing Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 3, the Raimi one, it just lost its focus. That's what good movies do. They keep the focus on the right characters. You can have so many other characters, but you need to focus on the characters that's telling the story, right? Um, and so that's what I think is going to do. I think that's what our expectations should be. Um, because I just don't think that, yeah, it would be really cool fan service to have all these people that on in live action in the MCU, but this movie is not the place. It really isn't. Um, and I think like the X-Men will have its time. Fantastic Four, obviously, it's being planned in the future. It's gonna have its time. But this movie is really finishing the Homecoming trilogy. It's gonna have plenty of things, like plenty surprises that we're gonna be so shocked about in No Way Home. And I think we should really stay focused on that. And also another thing, don't expect a Tobey Maguire Spider-Man 4. Don't expect Amazing Spider-Man 3 into this movie because obviously yes, they're going to have a lot to do with Tobey and Andrew Spider-Man, but they're like I said that they're to enhance the character of Tom Holland Spider-Man. That's what it's really about, right? And yes, they're going to have a great uh character arcs, whatever they do, right? They're going to help, you know, and have some great moments, but it will not be sacrificed by Tom's character's arc, not by his story. It will enhance his story. So I think that's what I'm trying to tell here is make sure your expectations are reasonable. Don't have them like don't let them skyrocket and not be reasonable. Let them be reasonable. Like exactly what I'm saying. This want to see a good Spider-Man movie. Want to see these villains be good. And that's what we should want, really. Um because at the end of the day, we should just want a good Spider-Man movie. We should want the best possible Spider-Man movie that we can get because No Way Home has the I think this has the biggest potential to be one of the greatest Spider-Man movies we have ever seen on the big screen. And and I really hope we get that. And and when you go on Twitter, when you go on, the other YouTube videos, their expectations are just so big. And I'm just trying to tell everyone, make sure you have the right expectation going into this movie. I'm not saying you have to have the minimum of expectation. No, have expectations. Just have expectations reasonable in the movie because this is going to be a really fantastic movie. I just know it. And my expectations are high, but for the movie, I'm not going like crazy theories this, crazy theories that. I'm trying to have my expectations high, but in a reasonable sense. And so really I really just you know that was really on my mind the last couple of days. Just you know a lot of things that get out of hand, and you're reasonable because this is going to be pretty much the biggest movie we have seen Marvel, Sony, or even the MCU do since Endgame. So I understand why people are so hyped. I understand why people are having so many theories. And It's gonna be very interesting how people react to the things in this movie because there's a lot of surprises and there is a lot of big moments. And I think when we hear Tom Holland say it's sad, it's brutal, it's depressing, it's not fun, it's gonna be very interesting to see this kind of Peter Parker story. It's kind of dark Peter Parker story that we've never seen before, especially a kind of story in the MCU. And so I'm excited for this. And in my expectation, like I said, keep your ex I would say make your expectation reasonable. Like you can have a high expectation, but don't let it get too out of bounds. You know, that's all I'm saying. Um, keep it focused on the story. If your high expectations for the story for what is gonna do with the action and everything else, awesome. I'm there with you. You know, I'm excited with you. My expectation for that is high as well. But I would just say, be careful that your high expectation is not too high because if it doesn't end up meeting your expectation, it's gonna not make the movie good for you, and that's something I do not want for you. For everyone that's listening to this podcast, make I want you to enjoy this movie as best as possible because this truly is going to be a movie that we will never forget, especially in with Spider-Man. This could be like a movie that will really be up there in MCU movies, and so um yeah, that's really just wanted to say about expectations. Um, and obviously, like I said, my expectations are very high for this movie because I know how big this movie could be. Obviously, it's going to be a big success in box office, but for in storytelling and how everything else, I think this movie is going to be very, very big. And I think like I said, expectation is just make sure it's in storylines. Make sure it doesn't go out of bounds. And sometimes I even have to check myself with that. Maybe this can happen. Maybe that can happen. Then I'm like, okay, Jordan, calm down. You need to bring yourself in. Keep your expectations high, but also be reasonable with them. And so that's I think that's also a good idea with every movie, really. If you can keep your expectations high, awesome, but keep them in bounds, then then you're not really setting yourself up for not liking the movie. So yeah, that's really what I want to talk about my podcast tonight. About just really uh make your expectations reasonable. You know, make sure your expectations are high for this movie, but don't expect like crazy out of bounds stuff. That's really all I'm saying. And so, yeah, really want to know what you think about the expectations of this movie. Do you think it's gonna meet it? Do you think this movie is gonna meet everyone's expectations, or do you think it's going to exceed it? Um, and so I would love to hear from you. Um, I would love to hear what you all think about this, about expectations of No Way Home. So yeah, I want to thank you all for listening to the podcast, and I can't wait to hear from all of you. And until next time, until the next episode of the Jordan Davis podcast, I'll see you later. Bye.